Where you sit is often just as important as what you say. Now think about this. I'm talking about literally where you sit at a business meeting. Maybe it's a casual meal with friends. Maybe it's a first date. Literally where your chair is around the table impacts the power and influence you have. Now think about this. Now, power is really about pushing people towards a goal. It's very authoritative. Whereas influence, that's where you persuade people towards a goal. It's very personal. Sometimes we need power in a situation. Sometimes we need influence in a situation. And sometimes we need both. And it's in this book, The Definitive Book of Body Language, one of my favorite body language books, 27 million copies sold, where the authors basically say, hey, where you sit often is the difference between a situation or a scenario being successful or unsuccessful. So that's the difference between success or not having success in a job interview, in a pitch meeting, getting that second date. I found this research to be absolutely fascinating. So what I'm going to do for you right now is I'm going to teach you where to sit and where that seating will land you in the most powerful position, also in the most influential position, and you may be surprised to know that those are two different seats. Now, to aid me in this demonstration, we are in my son Kingston's room. And please, don't tell him that I'm in his room and playing with his toys because he'll get upset. But I needed these volunteers. So what are we looking at right here? We are looking at a rectangular table. Now, the reason why I've selected this is because there's many different, table setups. You have circular tables, tables for two, but the rectangular table is the most popular in business and personal scenarios. Now, who are these volunteers? Well, we have the Cookie Monster over here. Far over here, we have Captain Underpants. Right over here, we've got my man Plex for the Yo Gabba Gabba fans. And then right here, everybody should know this guy. Hi, I'm Mickey Mouse. Right? So here are our folks, and clearly they're at a very important meeting building Legos. Now, my question to you is which one of these folks is in the most powerful position and which one is in the most influential position? Think about that. Now let me tell you. Actually, let's start with this. Let's start with the least, or what I would consider to be the weakest position. Well, that goes to Captain Underpants over there. Now, why is Captain Underpants in at least the weakest position of influence at this table? It's because Captain Underpants' back is facing the door. Check that out. That's the entrance door to Kingston's room. And when our back is facing a door, our body goes through all kinds of crazy biological issues. Really, like our stress level goes up so high that our blood pressure is up. Also, our body starts to secrete cortisol, and that's not a good thing. And the worst of all is that when we are seated across from someone, so you see that Captain Underpants is seated across from Mickey Mouse, that means that Mickey Mouse becomes his adversary. Oh, we don't want to get on the bad side of Mickey Mouse, but you don't want to get on the bad side of anybody. So whenever you are seated across from someone, studies show that 2/3 of people will think that your ideas are no good, right? That you don't have the right ideas, you don't have the right thoughts. So Captain Underpants is in the weakest position of influence at this table. That places Mickey Mouse in the strongest position of power at this table. Now, why is that? Because Mickey Mouse is facing the door. He's facing the entrance. And just as biologically our body goes through all kinds of problems when we're in a weak position, it actually goes through all kinds of good stuff when we're in a strong position. So right here, Mickey Mouse is seated at the head of the table, right? It means that he's facing the door. Our body secretes oxytocin, and that's a feel-good hormone. That's a good thing for us to have, right? When you're having sex, oxytocin is a good thing. Now, here's what's also fascinating about where Mickey Mouse is seated, is that when we are seated at the head of the table, which once again, the head of the table is always the chair that's facing the door, what that means is that before we even open our mouth, or should I say before Mickey opens his mouth, everyone at this table automatically assumes that Mickey is the smartest and the most powerful at the table. So Mickey, seated at the head of the table, is the most powerful. Now, it's the next position that completely blew my mind. The next position is actually the most influential. Do you know which one that is? It would be Cookie Monster. That's right. Cookie Monster is seated to the right of the head of the table. Now think, Game of Thrones fans, right? The right hand of the king. Or even think back to King Arthur days, where King Arthur actually had a round table where he would seat his knights. But it was the knight that was seated to the right of King Arthur who was considered the highest status among all of the knights. Now there's fascinating research as to why this is, and I encourage you to check it out, but it's Cookie Monster who has the most favor and influence over the head of the table. And research shows that whoever is seated at the head of the table, they consider the person to the right of them to be the most influential on them, right? They consider that person to have the best ideas, the best thoughts, and they're most prone to think that that person is going to be most helpful towards them. So it is Cookie Monster who has the most influence over the head of the table, and therefore it is Cookie Monster who has the most influence at this table. So now we've talked about Mickey Mouse, Cookie Monster, Captain Underpants. Where does that put our buddy Plex? Good old Plex is actually in the weakest position of power and the second weakest position of influence at this table. Now you may think, poor old Plex, right? That's not a good place to sit. But strategically, if you are at a meeting and you want to fly under the radar of that meeting, right? You don't want your ideas to actually get out into the meeting because it's a bad situation. You don't want to even be affiliated with it. Well, it may be smart for you to sit where Plex is. I mean, overall, I found this research as to where we should sit to be completely fascinating. And it underscores a point that I'm very passionate about. And that is when we develop and master our skills, our soft skills, like body language, it puts us into position to win more in life.